StoryCon presents Backstory, a podcast featuring writers, readers, and their stories, hosted by best-selling author Jennifer A. Nielsen.
Thank you for joining us today on the Backstory podcast. If you enjoy this podcast, please follow it. We always appreciate your ratings and reviews. Now, my guest today is Nick Brooks. He is an award-winning author and filmmaker from Washington, D.C. Nick's debut YA novel, Promise Boys, released in January of 2023. It received critical acclaim, including being a Boston Globe and Hornbook Award nominee in 2023, and in 2024, an Odyssey Award-winning title. Nick's next YA novel, Up in Smoke, was released on May 6th, 2025, just a couple of months ago. Truly a multi-hyphenate. Nick is also a rapper, known by the stage name Ben Kenobi, and has composed music for films such as Netflix's They Cloned Tyrone and HBO's The Cypher. Picking up the moniker The Righteous Writer, Nick has written for TV, film, and even video games. As a storyteller, he strives to tell stories that are timely and timeless. Welcome to the podcast, Nick Brooks.
Yeah, thank you for having me and for reading that really long intro. Thank you.
I think it takes that long intro to even just get the surface of some of your accomplishments. I wonder, Nick, if you've got screenwriting and filmmaking and music and storytelling in novels.
Mhm.
It's all story.
It's
Right?
all it's all story. It's all story. You know, it's I remember talking with the TV exec once, and she was asking, what if you focused on one thing? And I said, I am. I'm exhibiting mastery in one area, right? Storytelling. So I don't look at it as like, a jack of all trades. Is more so just flexing that storytelling muscle across different mediums.
Have you always been a storyteller?
Always. I wrote my first comic book in second grade.
I'd
Yeah,
love to hear about this comic book.
it was it's funny. It was called Dino Land, and it was a much darker Dragon Tales before Dragon Tales. Like, it was a brother and sister go to a park and get stuck in the sandbox, and and they have to battle their way out against these like really angry dinosaurs. It was, again, in second, you think, where's something like that come from? And I never forget, because I still have it back home in DC. I had a friend in class who even illustrated it. He drew pictures. I mean, it was a thing, and since then I've been telling stories.
Wow. In all of the forms in which you produce story, is there one area where you're like, this is the most pure form of storytelling? Does that happen for you, or is it just across the board?
It's across the board. I think they look different, right? For music, it's really fast, and you have to evoke emotion in a really short amount of time and a short amount of words, right? And then of course you have the music to help with that. I think in prose and novels, you could do a lot of exploration, right? And TV and film, it's also quicker, but there's more. Filmmaking is more dynamic. You know what I mean? So like, I think everyone just has every medium just has its own thing that I appreciate about it.
Oh, absolutely. Do you believe in the power of story? Do you believe that story itself carries power?
Absolutely. Whether you will that for good or bad, right? It can shape mentality. It can inspire action. It can do a lot of things. So I think, depending on how you use it, and just like anything else, right? When you become, again, a master of that tool, you can use it more and more effectively, right? Again, whether for good or bad.
Interesting. Can you expound on that? The idea of using story for bad. I've just never heard that expressed before.
Yeah, I mean, I think with power, with anything that contains power, I think it can be used for good or bad, right? So you take music for instance, right? Even in hip hop, which is a space that I occupy, there's sometimes stories told in hip hop that lead to more violence,
Mm.
right? And so that's, I think, a case where you're using the medium to express story, which is great, but the way is being done actually has a detrimental effect. You know what I mean? Um, or even media like news, right? Like these are stories that are being strung together, right? And even in media. So depending on how you shape a narrative, right, can be good or bad. It just can. It can lead to more destruction. It can lead to more. You think about you know, you think about January 6th, right? And what's the story that was being told that led to a group of people marching down to the Capitol trying to take it over, and then a young lady gets killed, right, by a police officer, right? So again, story can be used in so many different ways and forms, and depending on the way that you use it, it can lead to really great outcomes, or it can lead to not so great outcomes.
Okay, so because you have that respect for the power of story and you're so aware of that, how do you respect the power you are putting out into the world with your stories?
Absolutely. Well, for me, you when you read the blurb earlier, you mentioned kind of that moniker, the righteous writer. For me, it's all about putting positive themes, positive messages, inspiring themes into my work, right? So if you think about Promise Boys, and even if it even if it is a great mystery and a thrilling ride, it's still at the end of the day talking about the school to prison pipeline and how we treat our young men of color, right? And how we prejudge them, how they receive consequences, um, sometimes undeserving, right? How we show up for them in the classroom. If you think about Up in Smoke, the theme of activism and what it means to be a young revolutionary and to be young and to want to change your circumstance and what's the right and wrong way to go about that. You know what I mean? So for me, the way that I respect stories is always approaching it from theme. What do I want to say here? Because I do believe that I should be at least attempting to say something that can inspire, can provoke thought, can in some way enrich the audience.
I want to take you back just a little bit in reference to Promise Boys.
Yeah.
So, the organization who sponsors this podcast is Operation Literacy. You did an event for Operation Literacy at a middle school
Hmm. Hmm.
that was really nervous to host you
Yeah.
because the population of their school was such that they had never hosted an author visit. They rarely even had assemblies.
Wow.
And they were like, "Oh, we're bringing in this amazing author. What if the kids are disrespectful? What if the author just gets frustrated and walks away?"
Yeah.
You walked in
Yeah.
with Promise Boys
Yeah.
and you started to read,
Hmm.
and those kids locked into you
Yeah.
and you changed their lives.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that experience from your perspective, what you saw? Because I know what
Yeah.
people on our end saw,
Yeah.
and we watched a miracle unfold for those kids. What was
Thank
it for you?
I remember that, and I remember coming into the situation and the nerves, right? Like that you kind of mentioned, and I'll be honest, I'm from Washington D.C. It's a city that was really hit extremely hard by the crack epidemic. My really early years in the early '90s, it was the murder capital for consecutive years. I taught at-risk boys in D.C. I worked with, I feel like I've seen a lot. You know what I mean? And so I definitely remember that moment walking in, and um, I wasn't sure what to expect because, you know, those kids were great. They were great. They like you said, they locked in. We had a great time, and for me, what was really cool and what the most important part about that moment was like for what you said, for you all to witness that and see, oh, these kids 100% can lock in. It's really about giving them uh one it's about putting people in front of them that they can connect to, or that can connect to them, to meet them at their level, right? But it's the content, right? It's the stories. Are we putting stories? Are we putting lessons that are culturally responsive? Are we putting lessons? Are we putting stories in front of the kids that they're going to be able to make text to stuff connections, right? Like again, I'm a former educator, so I know this vocabulary, and so you know that's what's important. And so that is what I really appreciated about that moment, is you all being the witness, to know that, oh, these kids can 100% do it, and then hopefully for the educators at that school, they start to think about that, how they Like how does that impact the way they go about teaching these kids, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so that's what's most important.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was what we watched. We got pictures afterward of the kids sitting in the hallway, sitting at their desks, sitting at lunch, and they have your book open, and
Yeah,
their noses are buried in it.
yeah,
And these were kids that I think, you know, I mean, they're educators, they're teachers, there were phenomenal teachers,
yeah,
but you elevated the whole culture
yeah,
of that school, and it's when for me that was my first introduction to the kind of person
yeah,
that you are. And so to hear you talk about the respect for story, I kind of love that you go into that deliberate.
yeah, for sure, for sure.
All right, so where did you begin? You as a kid, you talked about growing up in DC, and what was your early life like? Where did life begin for you?
Yeah. You know, again, inner city, right? Like I grew up in the inner city, so my mom, was she got pregnant as a teenager, right? At 19. I guess it starts there, right? It starts with the caregiver, right? It starts with my mom, and she was a really strong woman, is a really strong woman, um, hard, very, very hardworking, right? Her whole thing was about getting us out of our situation. So I remember, she would take me to class with her. You know, she went to college a little later because she had me, but she would take me to school with her, and I saw, so education was big. Education was big. And like I said, hard work. Those were the two things, right? Education, hard work, discipline. That's what I saw a lot. And so that's where it started. And then yeah, just matriculating through, DC public school. DC is one of those types of cities, where you come into contact to a lot. You grow up kind of quick because of the city. So that was me. But again, I always had the arts as well. I was always creative, played music, played sports. That's the other thing. She put me in a lot, made sure I was in a lot of extracurricular activities to keep me, focused. Started doing music at a young age, right? I started, writing music at 14 and ended up performing at 15, and eventually thought that music was going to be the thing to really take me out of there, as they say. And when that didn't pan out, I pivoted to education, and so I started teaching. I did a program called Teach for America, and I taught in DC, which is where I started writing. So that's where this iteration, I feel like, the adult iteration of what I do now really started. It was when I was teaching. I was actually teaching a kindergarten class. I've taught everything. I've taught elementary, middle, and high. But for Teach for America specifically, I was placed in elementary school, and instantly I saw that. Well, I saw two things. One, the first thing I noticed was that the books were really easy to write. The books that I were reading were like, the dog jumps, the dog runs, like, and again, just the way my mind works, I've always been a hustler, always been, and always wanted to write, right? And always wanted to even work in entertainment. So it's kind of this trifecta. And so I'm like, man, these books are really easy to write. I think I can do this. But the second thing I noticed, um, was that my charter network wanted my kids to use. It was a charter school, so they wanted to use a certain type of vocabulary, like grit and self determination and hard work, perseverance, all these kind of buzzwords, really. And every week, a certain student will get what they call a path award for a kid who exhibited those traits right throughout the week. But the same kids won every week, and I quickly realized, well, the thought is great, but we're not teaching the kids what these words actually are. Like we just have them posted around the classroom, but there's no curriculum or instruction to support it, particularly for 5 years old. They don't know what perseverance means. And so what I started to do was I started to write children's books that actually explicitly taught these words. And it was a little black girl on the cover, right? Her name was Johnny. And so now I'm doing a lot of different things. I'm, you know, making it for early readers, right? Vocabulary for early readers and sight words, all the sort. I'm also teaching them specific vocabulary, and I'm putting characters in the books again that's allowing them to make text to self connections. So that's what I did, and it kind of took off from there.
Um, I thought it was interesting, Nick, when you're talking about your mom. My mom, I was raised my whole life with a single mom, and my mom also just a tough, strong woman, which she had to be.
Yeah,
My mom always believed, because every statistic for my life was probably, you had statistics for how your life was going to go, and you could look at all of those. And I think we both had moms who intervened with the statistics.
yeah,
And my mom always believed I could rewrite my stars.
Hmm.
Can you talk about your mom and her vision for who you could become?
Yeah, my mom always talked about me being great. Always talked about me achieving, again, education, achievement. Those were big things in our household. And as was my grandfather. My grandfather was a pastor. He was always just speaking affirmation, speaking positivity over my life. Um, just saying how great he's like, oh man, that, or how special I was. He would always constantly tell my mom, like, Crystal, that boy is special. That boy is special. So I would hear this all the time. How which could be good and bad. But just how special I was and how great I was gonna be. So definitely that goes a long way. Goes a long way. And it's I have daughters, I have twin daughters, they're 4 years old, and so I'm constantly telling them how great they are, how special they're gonna be, how beautiful they are, all of those different things. So it made a big difference.
Your grandpa in that message, when you overhear it, did it get inside you? Did it become part of the way you thought of yourself? Not in an arrogant way, but did you come to believe there was something in you that was amazing?
100%. Yeah. 100%. Always thinking that I'm special, in whatever way that is. Um, and like you said, not, remaining humble, which I am, but definitely believing that like I have a purpose. Yeah.
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 Yeah. All right. So you started with this purpose as a school teacher, and then you're writing these words, to help kids understand what is grit and what
Yeah.
is perseverance.
Yeah.
Uh, Tell me what that means in your life, grit and perseverance, and these key words.
Yeah.
How do I see that in your life?
Oh man, it shows up a lot. Me, it's all about being nimble, especially when you talk about trying to achieve success, and again in the industry that's really tough. So after I was working with kids and I was writing those books, I ended up going to film school because I felt like I was still working in education, but I wanted to be firmly like a storyteller. I went to film school and I started in 2017, graduated in 2020, right when pandemic hits and the film industry shuts down. And so, again, you talk about grit, perseverance. Instead of giving up, I made another pivot and I went back to writing books. Only this time writing prose, writing novels. Um, from that, sold a few TV shows. But then in 2023, we had a writer's strike, and so those TV shows went away. You know what I mean? It's like it's constantly a thing, right? And so I pivoted again, and then 2024 started writing a video game, Grand Theft Auto 6, with Rockstar Games, and so now I'm doing that, and that's really cool. While also, of course, writing books and still pursuing TV and film, but there's always a pivot to make because nothing is just easy. At least it hasn't been for me. But that's where the grit and that's where the perseverance comes in, and that's how it shows up for me.
All right. Well, I got to just ask the question because you brushed by it so fast. I know our listeners are like, wait, what? Can
Yeah.
you talk about the experience of writing on Grand Theft Auto 6?
Yeah, I mean it's been great. It's a unique experience. It's my first game. Really great people over on a team. Really smart people. I'm working with some of the smartest people I've ever worked with. Um, This one is always tricky because I'm not sure what I can and can't say, other than the fact that I'm working on it, just because it's been announced. But I will say it is one of the coolest experiences as far as like being able to contribute to like culture, right? Like this, it's a huge game, a huge franchise. Yeah, I can't say anything but glowing remarks. But it's been quite the ride, and I think we'll be coming out next year. They announced that it'll be dropping May 2026. So after that point, I think I'll be able to say more. But it's been a great ride.
Okay, but what I love is it's kind of this example of there's so many ways to be a writer.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so, you're writing prose or you are writing, very simple message books for
Yeah,
kids, or you're writing a video game. And then Nick, you also write music.
yeah, yeah,
All
yep.
right. Can you talk about that?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, so with this last novel, I did something really interesting. Up in Smoke. Up in Smoke is a dual POV novel about two friends who are solving a murder that happens at a Black Lives Matter protest. And what I did with this one is I actually released an accompanying album, and the rap album is told from a third perspective from one of the characters in the book, and the album has clues to the murder in the book. And so it's something really cool. In fact, yeah, I have it up here on my wall. But it's something that people haven't seen, right? My publisher Macmillan, they haven't seen it. Anybody I talk to is like, we've never seen anything like this. A YA murder mystery with the rap album that has clues to the murder in the book. It's and again, this is again one of those that you talked about, those kids, right, at the school. We're like, man, how is he going to be received? Again, this is a moment where I'm meeting kids where they're at, right, and understanding the hold that hip hop has on young kids, and trying to meet them there and finding ways to make reading even more fun. And so yeah, that's just a small example of how I use my rap persona, Ben Kenobi, and how it goes works in tandem with everything else that I'm doing. They don't really, and this is what I'm saying. They don't have to be separate things, right? It's all storytelling. It's all writing. All comes from the same skill set. But yeah, so that's the most recent project that I put out, is the Up in Smoke album, which came out with the book. So just a couple months ago, which people can find again under my moniker Ben Kenobi.
Yeah. Well, as this is playing, you're going to see this spike in people finding that album. So the album is Up in Smoke, to match with the title, Up in Smoke. This is your new release coming out, that came out in May.
Yeah.
Where did the idea for Up in Smoke come from?
Yeah, the idea really came from I think I was doing a school visit in Chicago, and a young student, maybe a 10th or 11th grade student, asked me uh, in front of this auditorium full of people, how do I combat systemic oppression? And it was such a heavy question for me on stage. There was even some chuckles from like some of the adults in the room, I think, because they were just uncomfortable. Like they didn't expect that question to come out of her mouth. But I honestly couldn't answer it in that moment, and kind of fumbled my way through it. But what that did tell me was that, like, our students are ready to talk about these things, and they want to talk about these things. And so again, coming back to theme and the things that I want to say, the messages I want to put in my stories, that's where the initial idea came from. It's like, okay, our students want to talk about this. How can I talk about activism, and how can I talk about being a revolutionary, right? But in a way that's digestible. Um, and so that was the first thing, right? The theme. What I want this book to be about. And so then, of course, I'm like, okay, what's the way in there? Maybe a protest. And then, of course, I do murder mystery. So, okay, murder at a protest. You know what I mean? So that's kind of how I got there and arrived to like the way in. And then from there, I just kind of developed the idea out. But that's where the initial spark came from.
Wow. Have you thought about that answer since then, what you wish you would have said? Or is it something still you can't discuss that in that format? Like, do you go back to that moment?
I don't go back to the moment necessarily, but it is something I think quite often about. Again, even just looking at where we are again in today's political, social, climate landscape, um, it's a really important question, and one that we all should be thinking about. Which is again why I wanted to write Up in Smoke, is because yes, pose the question to me, but let's all, even you young, you're right, even you young students at 15, 14, 13, 12, whatever, let's start thinking about that exact question so we can come up with solutions. Because I think it's getting to a point, and you go to the idea of Up in Smoke, and the album is much more revolutionary, much more radical than the book, right? I put things in there, but the idea of Up in Smoke, what that means to basically burn the system down. That's what it calls, burn the system down and send it all up in smoke and rebuild. But yeah, it's definitely something that I think a lot about, and it's something that I want us all to be thinking about. How do we change the world around us so that it can like reflect more of what we want to see?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that that's it, that the book becomes a starting place for a conversation that people don't necessarily know how to have with one another. And I really love it, that you're forcing some conversations or some thought
Yeah.
that otherwise might not have been there.
Yeah.
Your debut book,
Hmm.
Nothing Interesting Ever Happens to Ethan Fairmont.
Yeah.
That's your breaking into what it is to be an author, How
Mhm.
was that experience? Did it meet your expectations? Was it different than what you had expected?
Yeah. No, it was a great experience. That one came about in a really interesting way. The way I broke in was actually I had a script, a short film script about a kid who was alien hunting, and I met a lady who she actually initially had a different manuscript of Ethan, and it was like, I read your script. I think you have a really great voice. This manuscript isn't quite what I would like, but I think we can work together, and you can, write something that that we can put out into the world. And so that's how the first Ethan came about. Um, and so it was a very collaborative experience, which is much different, right, than like my recent work. Yeah, it was great. What I would like to say is it was the perfect like entry point, because it was a little bit of hand holding. You know what I mean? So it was like scaffold for me, right? Going from like little picture books to novels, it was great scaffolding, and it really set me up. That the team that I had around me really set me up to like understand how to write prose and understand how to write novels. And so, and then also because it was middle grade, the topic wasn't as heavy. You know what I mean? The word count was a little lower. So it was a nice entry point into like kind of build me up to the point of like an Up in Smoke. It's like a book and an album and all of these things. So yeah, it was a great experience, and yeah, I love Ethan. I love meeting Ethan readers because they're younger and they're always just like full of wonder. So I love meeting those readers.
When you meet those readers, what kinds of things do they tell you about Ethan as a character, what that book did for them? What do they say?
Yeah. It's so funny. A lot of them talk about like the inventions piece, or even parents will send. I've been sent pictures from parents who had their kids like want to invent something, or like they'll make some type of contraption, and say they were inspired by Ethan, which is that was me as a kid. I was always trying to make something, always trying to invent something. Thought I was an engineer, breaking stuff apart, trying to put it back together. So I love that so much. That's like the biggest thing is like the invention piece.
So it's inspiring creativity
Yeah.
in kids. And you obviously, creativity has got to be at the core,
Yeah.
one of the core things of being Nick Brooks. What is your general creative process? Like you get that seed of an idea. Where does that come from? What do you do with it once you get that seed? How does that look like?
Oh man, it's so many different. It could be on a walk, it could be on a hike. I could be inspired by something else, another movie. I watched this movie last night, Dream Scenarios, Nicolas Cage.
Mm.
I hadn't seen it before, but it was such a unique film. But that inspired me, right? And it's like, oh man, okay, like any when I'm taking in something that's extremely unique or extremely creative, right? Or that like kind of like fills me and charges me. You know what I mean? And it gives me a creative spark. So it can come from anything, creative spark. Then the next piece is just the execution. It's the planning. Okay, what is this creative spark? First, it's like, what medium is this? Is this a song? Is this a book? Is this a show? Is this a movie? Right? And then from there, once I kind of narrow down, okay, what this is going to be, then it's just following the process for that thing, right? Like that, because each medium has its own process. So I break things down to like it's like like those, what are they, the dolls where it keeps breaking down and
Like the
breaking down.
nesting dolls?
Yeah, exactly. That's how I think about things. Like I just keep breaking it down into little pieces. But that's overall, like that's kind of the headline.
Do you plan out very carefully? Is everything very detailed in your planning, or do you just see where it goes?
It's pretty detailed. It's pretty detailed, particularly if I'm writing, like, um, do a lot of outlining for everything. And, at a point, sometimes it can't be detailed because it's not fully formed, right? And so you're still kind of like figuring it out. But once I have a grasp of what it is that I want to do, um and like the execution piece can start to happen, that's when like the practical brain starts to take over, and things become really detailed to help me achieve what I'm trying to achieve.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I wonder for you, how much crossover is there in the different branches that you participate in? For example, if you are thinking of a prose story, uh, are you are you saying, "Oh, I can see how this would play out if it was a film"? right? Or if you're working on a film, are you thinking of, oh, this would be the soundtrack? Does it cross?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. If I'm thinking about a book, certainly I'm thinking about for screen. I'm already thinking about the music. Like I'm thinking about it all. If there's an idea spark, definitely thinking about the music, thinking about the graphic novel adaptation of that. You know what I mean? It's all, and again, it's creativity, and then there's again that's the hustle in me, right? It's like, okay, how can I take IP and blow this IP up, right? And then eventually, the goal is the guy, right, who actually gave me my scholarship to SC, but George Lucas, where you have, I mean, which again, Ben Kenobi, right? You start to see the parallels. But amusement parks, merchandise. I mean, ideas, and again, the power of storytelling, right, and how it can influence people and impact people's lives. It can turn into its own world, and so that's like peak storytelling to me is when you can take an idea from your head and like create an entire universe in real life that is its own universe, right? That has, conferences where people are dressing up like your characters. I mean, that's just next level. So I'm constantly thinking about all of those, I guess, verticals, right? That's something that I'm constantly thinking about. What's going to be that idea where I'm building out an entire universe that I'm able to like take from my head and from the page and actually see it manifest in real life.
My favorite thing, Nick, that you just talked about is without saying the words, you dream not just big dreams, your dreams fill universes.
Yeah.
And that tells me a lot about your success because I have this belief that we never achieve bigger than our biggest dream
Yeah.
because you make choices for the dream you have. And if you are looking to fill universes, I have a good idea of where your career is going. And that is so cool.
Yeah.
If you ever had the chance to make a movie of one of your books, what book would it be?
Yeah. Well, right now I have Up in Smoke on the brain. That would be the one. I'm currently writing that feature now. And again, because I've done the music to it, it just feels I can feel it in my bones. So I would say at this moment, my answer would be Up in Smoke.
Will I be sitting in a theater one day watching this, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. Let's hope so.
Right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
we never know, but let's good wishes
Yes,
going toward that.
yes.
If you could make that happen. When you are filmmaking, what role do you take in the production? Are you the screenwriter? Are you the director, producer? Do you do a little bit of everything?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a writer director. That's what I studied at SC, in the production school. That was my track, writer director. So I've directed a number of like short films and just preparing to direct my first feature film. I think that's like that's the next big feat for me is to direct my first feature film. So that's what I'm working on now, trying to put the pieces together.
So is your first feature film, is it going to be your book or would it be adapting somebody else's or original screenplay? What do you see that looking like?
I think, to be honest, it could be any of the three, right? But what it'll probably be is either an adaptation of my book or an original screenplay. And I have quite a few screenplays, and so I mean, the film industry is tough, and one of the big challenges for indie up and coming, writer director is financing, right? Like with everything. So that's the big piece right now, especially again, we're coming off, we had a strike and then LA had a bunch of fires and then streaming has really cannibalized the industry, so it's that's kind of the challenge right now is just finding the right project and matching that with the right team to help get it made. But it's certainly like something I'm working on every day if I can.
Yeah, no, that's super exciting
Yeah,
to me. Just the prospect and just that you've got a foot there where a
yeah,
lot of people just dream about it. You're making footprints, and I
yeah.
think that's amazing. When you are performing as a rapper, the Ben Kenobi, uh, so why Ben Kenobi?
That's been my name for a while. I think maybe even since like high school. But one Ben, my middle name is Benjamin. So I go. A lot of people call me Ben. Like, and so that's where it came from. But also just being a Star Wars fan, um, Obi-Wan Kenobi being, like this master Jedi, and me again. I talked earlier about good and bad, right? Good and evil. Again, my grandfather being a pastor, like all of these. That's something I grew up with, the idea of good and evil, and I think Star Wars is really interesting with how it talks about light and dark and who are the protectors of light, and what does it mean to be a Jedi, and all of these different things. So I was always just drawn to like those thematic elements, but as I got older, it just became more and more a part of my persona. Again, going to SC and receiving a scholarship from George Lucas, or coming out of SC and the first production I work on is The Mandalorian. You know what I mean? Like all of these different touch points that where it's like, man, this is kind of cool. How again you talk about that manifestation and calling things into your life. Me going by Ben Kenobi and having and being out here and in Los Angeles and having these different touch points with not just the creator of Ben Kenobi but the franchise. Um, and so that's where it came from. And again, that's also what I talk about a lot about in my music. Same similar themes, the idea of the pull of good and evil, right? And so it just kind of fit and kind of stuck.
Uh, this because you have that sort of a background. Is there any interaction with a fan in any of your venues that you will always remember?
Well, it's funny. I had an interaction with a fan. It wasn't at a show. This was at a random, I forget what it was. It was some cookout for somebody's birthday or something. But I was talking with somebody because I'm known, particularly at this time. I'm known much more now that I rap, but at this time, this was maybe 2022, 2023, before I put out the album. Once Up and Smoke the album came out, it kind of took me to not a major level, but a different level on the music scene. But before that, it was people primarily knew me as a writer, director, or author. And so I was talking with somebody, and I was telling them like, yeah, I make music too. I do little stuff, and they were like, oh, can you send me something? And so I sent them my like one of my mixtapes or something, my artist profile, and they just started screaming. And this is a grown man. He just started screaming and literally running in circles. He went and jumped up on a bench. Like it was like everybody in the park, because we're at a public park. Everybody's like, it's like, is it okay? Is it okay? He literally is running circles and jumping up and down. He's like, oh my God, you're Ben Kenobi? Like it was the it was the funniest thing. And he had been listening to my music for the last couple years. And he was like, man, like he was like, I'm such a huge fan. He was just stunned that I was Ben Kenobi. He had no because my first two album covers you can't see my face. And that was intentional again because it was something I was playing with. But now, like I said, I've stepped out much more front facing, just with the in combination with the book and the album, the most recent album, Up in Smoke. But yeah, that's an interaction I'll never forget because he just lost it, and that was really cool to see.
And how did you react? Were you just like, "Hey, it's cool, man. You don't have to climb up there," or were you just letting him do his run and then just like, "I don't know what to do"?
Well, I'll be honest. At first, I really didn't know what had. At first, I really didn't because it just happened so suddenly. I
Hmm.
had never thought that would be the. I don't know. I didn't know what to think at first, and then when he came back and told and was like, "Oh my God, you're Big Kenobi," I just was. Yeah, I don't know. It was one of those moments. It was one of those moments where it's kind of surreal. You're also kind of like embarrassed or shy. You kind of I just kind of played it off like, oh, like in my head, I'm thinking that's crazy. It's one of those moments that really hits you later. Like later on when you're in the car leaving, you're kind of like, man, I can't, like, that's crazy. Like, there's people out here who really are listening to my music that I don't know, and they're loving it, right? So, um, yeah, I was cool about
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure.
it.
Um, so you've had all of these successes, and your star is just rising in so many different ways. Can you tell us about a time when things didn't go your way in this career?
Yeah, absolutely. Like it happens all the time. With Promise Boys, that was a show that we had sold to Netflix. Barack Obama and Michelle Obama were producing the show. Like, it was a really, really, really big deal. But then again, like I said, we sold that at the end of 2022. Spent a lot of 2023 writing the show, and then all of a sudden there's a writer strike. Midway through 2023, and the industry shuts down, and because of that, people get fired. So execs who were really in our corner at both Netflix and at Higher Ground were no longer there on the other side of the strike, and as such, our show went away. And so that was a really, really, really tough moment, sobering moment, because I just knew, like, man, whew, this was easy. I'm okay. I'm writing my first TV show, at Netflix with the Obamas. I'm EPing, the creator. Um, and just like that, you know what I mean? Something out of my control happened that took the show away. And so now we're like resetting and trying to figure out, okay, what's the next step? But, that's just one example. And that type of thing happens all the time, where you think something's going to happen and it doesn't. And so I think the key is not becoming disappointed. It's not giving up. It's getting grit, perseverance, and then remaining nimble.
What advice would you give to younger Nick Brooks, like 15 or 16-year-old Nick Brooks? What would you say to him?
Yeah. I would say, I don't know, maybe some lottery numbers I could have I could look at and go back and tell them, what I mean? some stocks to hey man, put that summer, because I used to be a lifeguard put that money in some stocks. I mean, I'm kind of being funny, but I'm also I'm being real too, because like, I think all the things where I'm at now, like all the decisions that I've made have led me to this point, right? Which is great. I don't know if there's anything I could have done to get me like to this point sooner, or give me, you know what I mean, give me much more success quicker, other than some of these, like, yeah, again, I'm being a little facetious, but literally stocks. Yeah, I would be hesitant to change anything else too, because I don't know where it would take me. You know what I mean? I feel like everything is
Yeah.
taking me here, and um it's like, yeah, sure, I could have started writing a book at 15, but I didn't have the skills that I've gained from SC. Sure, I could have went to SC for undergrad, but I don't know if I would have met the cohort, the same people who are around me now, who helped, you know what I mean, who helped give me other opportunities. So it's like it's hard to say. Um, but I would mostly say, hey, just remember to always try to make the best decisions you can. You be disciplined, right? Maybe would have like stayed in shape a little more. little things, you know what I mean? But really things that less about like career advice, but more the person, right? Um, Being the best person I could be. And maybe some financial decisions here and there. I'm also big on like financial literacy. So yeah,
Yeah. But
yeah,
overall, all of those decisions, whether, the better and than the lesser decisions, it brought you here.
yeah, yeah,
Um, Nick, what's up next for you? Where will we see you next?
yeah, yeah.
Books or film or music? What's next?
Yeah, for me, I would really like to say I really love to direct my first feature film. That's the thing that I'm most excited about right now. And then there's always more. I'm working on a couple books, working on a graphic novel. I'm always working on things. So you'll certainly see more music. You'll certainly see more books. But thing for me that I'm like, this is where my focus is right now, is making that first film, that first feature film. And so hopefully that's something that you see coming from me really soon.
I love it. Can you
Yeah.
tell us all the different ways if somebody wants to find you and learn more about you, where do they go?
Yeah. You can go to my website. It's thenickbrooks.com, THENICKBROOKS.com, thenickbrooks.com. You can find me on social media. Instagram is just official Nick Brooks, TikTok official Nick Brooks. Um, I think X is like who is Nick Brooks? You could Google me, Nick Brooks writer, and I'm
Well,
sure I'll pop up. Yeah, those are the primary ways, but I'm easy to find, easy to get in touch with.
awesome. And I encourage everybody to get on because we have just scratched the surface of who Nick Brooks is, and there's so much more. Please follow him and find him online and listen to the music and read the books and go to the debut film
Yeah, man,
when it comes out. Nick, thank you so much
for sure.
for making time for this interview in your very busy life.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it.
Thank you,
So
Jennifer.
thank you. So, to all of our listeners, remember, of course, that everyone has a backstory. It's the life that happens to us before we begin happening to life. It will mold you and form you and make you into the amazing person you are. Get out there and tell your story. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to Backstory. If you'd like to enjoy more episodes, visit us at storycon.org/backstory. That's STORYCON.org/backstory.